being above 8,000 meters, which is what people call the death zone, you're practically dying while you're up there. The next step is to do it without oxygen, and that's what excites me.
Chris Fisher is a professional mountain endurance athlete and founder operating in some of the most extreme environments on Earth. With record-setting ascents across Colorado, the Andes, and the Himalayas, including a full winter completion of all 58 Colorado 14ers and a 400,000-foot vertical month, Chris has built his career on sustained execution at altitude.
Why does it take $1 million?
You'll climb one peak and you'll take a helicopter from this base camp to the next one over. That'll cost you $5,000 right there. And you're talking about doing that 14 plus times on top of 40 to 60,000 for just a single mountain to climb it.
He partners with elite climbers and global outdoor brands to document high-stakes expeditions. Chris applies the same focus, structure, and resilience that define world-class performance both in the mountains and in business.
Growing up, I would have probably said that limits were real, and I was very limited of who I was as an individual. I realized that I can literally go do whatever I want as long as I put my mind to it. If you want it, you can will it.
Chris,
Right.
welcome to the Deal Table.
Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you back in your hometown of Dallas, original hometown of Dallas. Now you're a citizen of the world.
Citizen of the world, that's probably the best way to put it.
Okay, so you were living in Breckenridge for a while, but where do you call home now?
Home is wherever my van is parked or my duffel bag is sitting.
Okay, and you're on the move.
I'm on the move.
Okay, well, welcome. I shared with you that I spent the summer in Denver, Colorado, welcoming our first grandchild, and I worked out as often as I could at the Carla Madison Rec Center in Denver, and there is a mural on the wall that I believe, I'm going to confirm with them, recognizes your winter 14ers speed record. And I'll just say, you are a mountain endurance athlete, and you are the first and only mountain endurance athlete that I've met. So welcome, high altitude climber, adventure filmmaker, and you climbed all 58 of Colorado's 14,000 foot peaks, which is kind of staggering. I wouldn't have thought there'd be 58 mountains with peaks above 14,000. And you did that faster than anyone ever had, completing it in 72 days. So basically, you know, one mountain every day and a quarter, something like that. And this was captured in a mural at the Carla Madison Rec Center, which you weren't aware of.
And I had no idea.
Yeah, so now everybody like me, some old guy rehabbing his hip that's going to swim in the pool, is seeing, you know, Chris's record. So I'll just start there. At what point did you wake up one morning and say, I think I want to climb 58 14,000 foot peaks in 72 days?
Sure. You know, this was kind of a journey that started years before I made the decision to do it. But essentially, my partner Aaron and I were driving home from Texas after we just did the 75-mile endurance run through Carlsbad National Park to the top of Guadalupe National Park.
How long did that take?
22 hours.
I was waiting for him to say 22 days.
That's what I was, and I would have been impressed.
Yeah.
22, how many, 75 miles?
75 miles. And so it traverses the two national parks that are practically connected, and it ends on Texas' highest mountain.
Okay.
And anyways, we were driving home from that project, endurance event, and we were listening to a podcast of our two friends, Andrew and Andrea, who had both done 14er projects. Andrew is the only other person to climb all the Colorado 14ers in a single winter.
Okay.
And I looked over at Aaron and I was like, I'm going to do that. This was like 2 months before I started the project.
Right.
And that was my decision. It was literally just off the fly, and
there you were.
Yeah.
So there was an article in a outdooring magazine, and it said that part of your thought process was apparently the gentleman who had done this before you was married and had kids. And you said to the magazine, well, I figured if I'm not married and I don't have kids, so I'm bound to be able to beat this guy.
Sure, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And, you know, I had no idea what I was really getting into at the time.
Yeah.
I had dabbled with backcountry skiing for probably 2.5 years prior to this. So I was familiar with moving through technical terrain in the winter, skiing dangerous slopes, things of the nature, right?
Yeah.
But the Winter 14ers provided a ridiculous amount of challenges that I was learning as I went.
So during the project, you're climbing and you're learning.
Correct.
So I got to think that the logistics of that, just how do you go, how do you map out, I'm going to start here and then I go there and then I go there. It would seem to me that that's a huge piece of that puzzle is, maybe they all line up sequentially in some easy way, but I suspect it was more complicated than that. Then you got to figure out, and I say this as a layperson, how do I technically ascend that mountain? Tell me about that.
Sure.
What all goes into that?
So a lot of the process of climbing these mountains in an orderly fashion and with speed was really chasing weather windows.
Okay.
In the winter in Colorado, we have pretty disastrous weather, walking through blizzards and winds that are almost hurricane level some days. And so it's a lot of how can I find the weather to climb a certain mountain, right?
Yeah.
And so I was working with a couple different weathermen, meteorologists there in the Denver area, and they were providing me weather updates literally every single day with where I should be, what the weather looked like, what to expect, when and what time of the day there would be a certain gust of wind, for example. And so they were providing me all this information, and I was basing where I was going to go the next day off of that. My original goal was to try to do this in 50 days, and I was on pace to do this in 50 days. I had done over half of them in just 17 days.
Wow.
Until I caught food poisoning from eating at the Purple Pig in, I forget the town name.
Damn that Purple Pig.
Colorado. Don't
Yeah.
eat at the Purple Pig.
Yeah. Shame on them.
In relation to like a marathon, like running a marathon, running up a giant 14,000, 20,000 foot, whatever, is that comparable? Like a 26 mile, because that's all I can think about is like, because I can get behind like a half mile or a half marathon. I've done one of those, never done a marathon, but is it kind of the same thing? Like running a marathon and then running up a mountain?
Not at all.
Okay.
I've ran one road marathon in my life. I'm actually running my second one in 2 days, and they're nothing alike. Running up a mountain is, in my opinion, way more difficult, but it really depends on the level of athlete you are. The top marathoners are doing extraordinary things with speed, VO2 max, and just pure athleticism. They're just really not the same, though. With mountain running, in Winter 14er mountain running, well, which isn't really running, but running up and down mountains have way more, I think, consequential risk, where you could trip on a rock, fall, break your arm or your leg, and have to wait around until you get rescued, for example. And so there's a lot more risk that you have to calculate when running up and down small mountains, big mountains, anything in the middle.
So there's a lot more like mental gymnastics.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not just the physicality.
Right.
Got it.
And as somebody, I'm thinking about Guinness Book of World Records, where somebody has to be there to witness this. Is somebody tracking you, and how are you reporting in that you've completed each of these things?
It's interesting. So there's a website called fastestknowntime.com, and they keep track of almost any significant mountain record in the world that you can think of.
Yeah.
As well as Winter 14ers, for example. So almost anything you can think of that's runnable, climbable, Mount Everest. There's a database for all of this, and to provide the data to claim a record, you need to track with a GPS watch. So I'm typically wearing a Garmin that tracks my entire route, GPS, location, time, elevation, mileage, all those good statistics. And then typically on a more profound record, such as climbing a big mountain like Everest, you'll have a backup GPS, so you can have 2 data points to provide to people that are looking through this data to initially
sort of validating. Yeah,
exactly.
that you've done it. You get food poisoning, which slowed you down, but otherwise you would have been on track to do this in 50 days, which means you're doing more than one peak a day, which I have struggled to get my brain around how that's possible. You've got weathermen that are telling you in real time what's happening. And did that, I'm sure that impacted your choices of where you were going to climb each day, probably in some otherwise inefficient ways.
Yes. So Chris Tomer, the weatherman that was helping me out, he would, give me a basic rundown of a mountain range, and in these different ranges, there's groups of peaks. And so some of these groups are easier to do together than doing them separately. Like, for example, out in the Chicago Basin of the San Juans in the Wimmanoosh Wilderness, there's 4 14ers, and to get there, just to the base of them is 25 miles, where you have to drop down into the Wimmanoosh on skis or on foot. I chose skis.
Yeah.
And walk for 25 miles just to get to the base of these peaks. And now you're out there in the middle of nowhere by yourself, right? But instead of going out there 4 times, I sat there and did all 4 together.
Right.
And that was a 24-hour effort, for example. So spending one day to do multiple peaks in a group typically became more efficient than going in and out multiple times.
So on the community aspect of it, because you said multiple times the weatherman was helping you out with that weather window.
Sure.
Now, is that a paid service? Is it just because he's your friend? Is it because of the community aspect? Like, what's the incentive? And I don't want to sound like a cynical
Sure.
asshole, or I don't know the best word to say it, but it's like, why would he help you out? Is it just because he likes you? Or is there a financial incentive? Or was he waiting for the shout out on the Deal Table podcast?
He might be waiting for the shout on the Deal Table podcast,
Yeah.
but he does this professionally. He's doing this for people on 8,000 meter peaks, climbing Everest every season. For me, I was introduced by my friend Andrew Hamilton, who had the record prior to me. And he introduced me, and Chris Tomer came in and decided to help with no charge.
Wow.
He just truly wanted to see me succeed and have the tools available to get there if possible. So community, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, because like I do want to, if we're not careful, we're going to talk about how awesome this you are and the mental there. But I do want to get into the business side of it as
Sure.
well, because like as easy it is to talk about these things, I want to make sure that we get some business value out of it, because that's the mission of the podcast itself. But like, what is the business implications of, like, what can we learn? What is there money? Like, is it just because it's cool? Hey, I get all the women. What is it from? Or
Are
is it
you a
just like,
professional? Are you making a living doing it?
yeah,
Correct, I am.
Yeah.
So I am a professional mountain athlete, and I'm also a videographer, photographer, public speaker of a sort, and I work different angles with sponsorship and brands. Working with a specific brand like Rehab, who is my gear mountaineering sponsor, who makes anything from ski wear to running wear, sleeping bags, all the sort. I am consistently every year talking with them about how I can provide value to their brand as an athlete with representation of the brand, while doing these endeavors that people aren't typically doing. So it's a way for them to market their products, as well for me to get paid to do these endeavors, essentially.
So you have sponsors, and then I presume that you know, as you can tell, I'm probably old enough where I'm not fully familiar with the social media influencing, but I understand that people can have a platform on social media. So do you have a platform where you are promoting things and you're able to monetize that? So you have a couple of different revenue streams from being a professional. Is that what
Absolutely.
you call yourself, a mountain endurance athlete?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm on Instagram currently. I have not a huge following, like 11,000 people, but it's enough of a tight-knit community where, you know, you're watching somebody in your community do amazing things that maybe they want to buy the jacket you're wearing,
Right.
that I've been wearing for 3 years and still functions and gets me through the objectives, for example.
Right.
With that, photography and videography, I've picked up this skill with my cameras where I can go on these extreme expeditions and follow athletes around for other brands and capture moments and experiences that most people quite honestly can't. With my speed and skills and ability to keep up with some of the faster people in the world, I have this unique position to capture it in real time and to be able to bring those photos or those videos to a brand or a production company and sell them. And that helps pay for a lot of my expeditions as well.
Got it. So to that end, I understand that you filmed or had filmed a near-death experience of your own.
I actually haven't filmed a near-death experience, but I have been in close calls where death is definitely a
Somewhere in the neighborhood.
yeah. No, I don't think I have anything on my
Okay.
in my log of me almost dying, but I have been in close calls, and it's very scary.
but isn't that the nature of the sport?
It's part of the risk,
Yeah.
calculated risk.
We talked about Victor Vescovo, who's been on this podcast before, who climbed Everest and skied across both poles and went to the depths of the oceans and with a submersibly built. And when we talked to him, I said something like, "You're a risk taker," and his response was, "I'm a risk mitigator." And I think I saw similar language in researching you, is that you talk about the fact that you are assessing risk and you're trying to remove risk from the equation, but you're engaged in a high-risk activity where you're trying to mitigate that risk. So it sounds like a piece of friction there.
Absolutely. There's always risk involved with the things that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Climbing an 8,000 meter peak without oxygen by myself and a single push from base camp, there's a ton of risk there. I stood on the summit of the 8th highest mountain in the world by myself, and I was in charge of getting myself up and down without having any Sherpa around to help. So with these, extreme endeavors, there is a lot of risk, but I sit there and I think through how can I minimize that risk for myself while also accepting the possibility of something going wrong.
Yeah. So you talked about oxygen. Talk about that risk when so you can get oxygen deprived, you can lose consciousness. That speaks for itself. You can fall on the mountains. What do you consider the greatest risk in mountain climbing specifically?
That's a great question. The greatest risk in mountain climbing, I think it's different for every mountain you climb. When you're climbing the biggest mountains, the tallest mountains in the world, like Everest, for example, or any of the 8,000 meter peaks, it's definitely the oxygen levels.
Yeah.
You have, I forget the exact percentages, but it drops down a lot. I think it's something around like 6% compared to whatever we're at here. And so being above 8,000 meters, which is what people call the death zone in mountaineering, you're practically dying while you're up there. Right. Whether you're moving, sitting still, there's no recovery. It's hard to eat. It's hard to sleep. It's hard to do anything. And so the biggest risk is it's really just staying alive and keeping your mind awake in situations like that.
Right.
Because like you mentioned, oxygen deprived, you can get HACE or HAPE, and there's both different functions. And the HACE affects your brain.
Right.
And very quickly can you die from it.
Yeah.
If HACE onsets, you don't have a lot of time to self-evacuate or people around you to help get you off the mountain. And so there's not a lot of room for error when it comes to high altitude mountaineering. Now, when you're talking about smaller mountains of the world or more technically challenging ones like real vertical rock climbing, you have different risks like rockfall or avalanches and things like that. So every mountain's honestly different.
Yeah. A different type of oxygen issue. I've been a scuba diver since I was about 12 years old. And I'm old enough where that was a long time ago. That was when we had J valves on tanks and we didn't have electronic gauges, and so it was probably objectively riskier. But I'd been taught about nitrogen narcosis, descending too quickly, which I did, and I found myself stabbing a coral reef with a knife until my uncle grabbed me and removed me. And I had this awareness of what I was doing and this confusion over why I was doing it, but at the same time, the effect was the effect. And if I hadn't been with a buddy, it may have been a very different outcome. So exactly. I would imagine you face something similar, if not worse, at a height.
Yeah, especially when you're alone. I have to self-assess those things in person to myself. And granted, I am on a radio with base camp and individuals staggered across the mountain. So worst case scenario, somebody could come up. It's not going to be quick, if possible at all. So I'm on radio consistently through these climbs on these bigger mountain objectives, and these people like Dawa Stephen, who is the expedition company leader of Asian Trekking and who does all the logistics for my big mountain climbs in the Himalaya, for example, he is consistently every 30 minutes to an hour checking in and asking me questions to make sure I am coherent.
Yeah.
And if not, he will tell me to turn around, and that's one of those things where if he says turn around, I got to turn around.
So what's the difference between and again, I know nothing about this world, but I understand there's mountains in Colorado, and hey, I pull up my van and let me run up that thing. Let me climb up that thing versus needing an expedition where you have different radio points and expedition leads and Sherpas. Like, can you walk me through like the different categories or levels and what are the, like, again, if it's a Colorado thing, I can just drive up, get out of my car and go.
Sure.
Versus if I want to go to the Himalayas, I got to book a flight. I got to, like, can you walk me through A, the different categories, and B, what are the financial constraints of each category?
Absolutely. So like you mentioned with Colorado, you can park your van and kind of just walk up the mountain, at least in summer, right? In winter, things are way more difficult. And most people aren't climbing them in the winter to begin with. I think there's only 19 of us that have ever done them all in the winter, for example. So that's like one category. You have classifications of mountain climbing. It's class 1 through 5, and 5 is where you see the more vertical rock climbing and everything in the middle. And so different mountains have different aspects of technicality and difficulty with those classifications, and it's deeper than just class 1 through 5. But for example, like the Colorado ones, you can walk up, pay some gas money, show up, and with some good shoes and a sandwich and a bottle of water, for example, you can go climb the mountain. For going to the Himalayas, it's way different expedition. Like you mentioned, getting a flight, for example, it's not cheap, it's not quick. From America, from Dallas, it's 25 hours to get to Kathmandu, flying through Dubai. So you're talking about a long day of travel just to get there to even start your expedition. And months prior to that, you're talking with companies and different logistic individuals who are working on the mountain and have been doing this for decades, where they have porters in these valleys who carry all the gear from low elevations up to base camp. And so that could take anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks for these porters to carry all the gear just to set up base camp at Everest, for example. And so the season starts way before anybody gets there. We have porters who are working for like $20 a day, 20 US dollars a day, carrying up hundreds of pounds of gear every single day of their life up and down from Everest Base Camp. And that's just to set up the infrastructure for people to go there in the first place.
And then infrastructure is for the community, it's for everybody, right? Or do you have to, is it each individual expedition has its own infrastructure?
Each individual expedition has its own infrastructure. So there's however many dozens of different expedition companies working on a single mountain. Like at Everest, there's over 1,000 people there, and there's probably 15 to 20 different companies that encompass that 1,000 people, right? And so every company has their own set of logistics and their own set of porters that carry stuff in, and their own Sherpa that guide and provide services on the mountain above base camp. But these services aren't for anybody and everybody. You do have to pay a price to be able to go just to base camp in general. And to go above base camp, to go climb the mountain, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars. Like for Everest, for example, I think the cheapest you can climb it for nowadays is around $45,000 to $50,000. And that's baseline package, a little bit of oxygen, one Sherpa to climb up with you. And that's what most people are doing commercially, right? But for someone like me who isn't using Sherpa, who isn't using oxygen, and isn't using support above base camp, it's a little bit cheaper, but not much cheaper. It's still really expensive to get the permitting, get the infrastructure there, and just to be able to go climb or even have the opportunity to. And so whenever I'm going out there, going for an Everest expedition, for example, or a Lhotse, which is the peak connected to Everest, I'm out of pocket at least $15,000 to $20,000 minimum.
Is there, at the base camp, is there permanent infrastructure, or is it all just temporary?
It's mostly temporary.
Okay.
So there's a couple of villages just a few miles down the trail, really, and most of these companies have tea houses, which are lodges, and they'll bring their stuff there, and nobody stays there all year round. In the summer, it's their wet season, and so it's consistently snowing, very cold, very wet. So they'll break down camp, bring it over there, and most of it will stay there for however many months.
It just seems like if they know there are going to be thousands of people there for a season, build a cabin, build a couple buildings, or...
Well, the problem at Everest Base Camp is this is all done on a glacier that is moving something like 1 to 3 meters a day.
Yeah, then probably shouldn't build a...
Yeah, that's probably...
That was a stupid question.
Yeah, but it's a good question.
Great
You got a good answer.
Yeah.
So you don't use supplemental oxygen
I never have.
on these climbs. Was it Edmund Hillary that was the first climber of Everest?
Sounds about right.
He and his Sherpa didn't use supplemental oxygen, but am I wrong? Don't almost all climbers use supplemental oxygen?
Nowadays, yes. If you would have looked back about 15 to 20 years ago, no. There were more people not using oxygen than using oxygen because it was more expensive to get oxygen and more like there's more technical logistics into getting oxygen to the mountain.
Right.
Nowadays, you can put like a 10-pound canister on your backpack and that'll get you however many hours.
Right.
Whereas back then it was probably 3 times the weight.
Also seems like nowadays, like again, obviously I've never been there and I haven't done that much research, but every time I hear or see anything about Everest, you always hear about the long lines to the summit. And like I would be, if you're trying to go no oxygen, in there a fear of just being stuck in a queue?
That's one of those risks. And for that specific situation, if you get caught into a line and nobody lets you pass, you kind of just have to turn around. It's one of those things that if you're up there too long without oxygen, you're probably going to die. Or just be really messed up to the point of not being able to self-evacuate yourself. So like, for example, my good friend Tyler Andrews, he's been chasing the world record speed ascent on Everest over the past 2 seasons, spring and fall. And I've been there supporting him for the past 2 seasons. And he's faced a multitude of different problems going for the speed record on Everest, including traffic and people being in the way. And it's unfortunate because there's a lot of people that probably shouldn't be at Everest to begin with. Like I've met people, it was their first hike ever, and they're climbing the tallest mountain in the world, which is absurd. I mean, the guy has no qualifications and is going and climbing the highest mountain in the world, right? So there's a lot of people that shouldn't be there to begin with, and it gets in the way of what people like myself are trying to do, which it's fine, right? It's what the business is there for in Nepal, and that's just part of our risk assessment and part of our logistics essentially.
John Krakauer wrote a book, Into Thin Air,
Right.
gosh, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, and he talked about a famous expedition where I think it was the most fatalities in a single climbing season. And one of the things he documented or chronicled was that there were what he called tourists that basically pay Sherpas to carry them up the mountain. And it's appalling. I mean, I know in your case, you probably don't want to say, well, I'm more important than them, but the notion of somebody that doesn't have the requisite skills and abilities, hasn't trained, and is basically paying somebody to carry them up the mountain, that just seems fundamentally wrong.
It is, and it puts a lot of people's lives at risk too.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting world over there. These people are working for wages that are minimal compared to what an average American makes, or even a minimum wage American.
Right.
Like, for example, some of the Sherpas that are risking their lives almost every day on Everest, going in and out of the icefall and to the summit, sometimes multiple times in the season, are getting paid less than like 5,000 USD for the season.
Wow.
Crazy.
I'm sure in Nepal that buys a lot more than 5,000 would in the United States. At the same time. It is what it is. It's a paltry amount of money for the risk that they're taking. And the Nepalese government, I think, is incentivized because of the tourism associated with Everest to sell as many slots as they can. So you've got this angst there, which is they want to monetize it. That means more people means traffic jams. It means more bodies racking up on the mountain there that are frozen into the, which is another thing Krakauer talked about, was how many bodies you pass on the ascent, which is a pretty morbid thing to think about.
It's kind of scary.
It is kind of scary, but we talked to Victor about that, and he said, well, the people would have to risk their lives to try to remove them from the mountain. That doesn't make any sense either. Yeah.
In Everest, like for Nepal, isn't that like kind of like the main export? We're not technically not export, but the main industry rather.
Yeah, it's their biggest for sure. The 14 peaks, which I think they have 8 of those. So the 14 peaks are the 14 8,000 meter peaks of the world, and they're all in the Himalayas. And Nepal houses, I think, 8 of those, if I'm correct.
Well, the reason I ask is because I used to live in Dubai and Doha, and a large of the labor force were like Nepalese,
right?
So it's like, what are you doing in your economy that you have to ship out such a large labor force to find work?
Yeah, it's just a really poor country, unfortunately, and I think there's a lot of corruption there, as you would find almost anywhere, right? But they're more deep rooted, and I'm not gonna I have the answers to their problems, because I absolutely do not. But it's unfortunate to see sometimes when you can see people paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to go climb a big mountain, but in return, you're risking however many handfuls of Sherpas' lives who have to do this to support their family. So it's a really hard balance, and I don't think there's just a perfect solution. And maybe somebody has a solution. It's not me. But like for me, for example, watching that, it makes me want to have nothing to do with it. And that's typically why I don't climb with Sherpa or climb with guides, because I don't want my mistakes to be put on, somebody else's back.
So I would challenge you a little bit on that. Not the mistakes part, but like the economic impact, because one of my biggest regrets in life, and it was years later that I realized it was a regret, is when I was living in Doha, I had a flat tire, and me being a Texas boy, I know how to change my own tire. And I was doing this process, then a laborer was like, I do that. He didn't speak English, but he's like, I can do this. I was like, I got this. Because I was thinking in terms of, like the window cleaner guy that's at the stoplight. And then long story short, which was by the end of this process, there was about 15, 20 of these laborers looking at me changing my tire. And I was annoyed because I'm not paying somebody else to do my tire. I got this. And it wasn't until years later that I was like, I could have given them money. It would have been more money they would have had for probably several days or maybe even a week. But more than that was probably the first time that they have ever seen a white male do any kind of physical labor in their lives. And it was just like, but it took several years for me to think that. And the reason I bring that story up is, yes, you may be thinking, oh, with those Sherpas, I don't want to take part in this corrupt system or this lack of economic system. But it's like, but for them, that's how they get paid.
Sure.
So by you not using them, you're not paying them either.
That's the hard part. Whereas I'm still paying for logistics. So my good friend Dallas Steven that I mentioned earlier, he's got the oldest trekking expedition company in Nepal and all of Asia, actually. And so I still pay him, which pays other Sherpa and porters to do their jobs. It's just different. So he can allocate his resources elsewhere to people that are paying, higher dollars, for example, for instance.
Yeah.
But I get both sides of it, and that's why I don't think there's a solution. And because they need the money to live, and a Nepalese yearly salary is like $1,000 USD for a normal Nepali. So going and making $5,000 or $10,000 on the mountain for a couple months, it's huge. So I completely, I get it, and understand it. Yeah.
It's all
To catch 22, as they would say.
Exactly.
It's problematic both ways. I read in the interview I referenced earlier, someone was asking you about how you trained for some of these extraordinary things you've done. We talked about the 14ers, but you also climbed 400,000 vertical feet. It's a world record that you hold. And someone was asking you how you train for it, and you said, I don't really train. Is that an accurate statement? And walk me through that.
Sure.
I did a triathlon, a few triathlons back in the day, probably when I was Ryan's age, and I trained my butt off. I ran, I biked, I swam, I did all of this. And so I have a feeling you do something to be in the condition that you're in to allow yourself to do that. So I think what you were saying was you didn't train in a highly specific way for that activity?
So that was one of the first projects I ever did. That was 4 years ago now, I think.
Yeah.
And I didn't really train for it. I literally got off the couch. I had ankle problems all summer and got off the couch and went and broke this record because it's something I really wanted to do.
There's hope for us.
There's hope. You can get off the couch,
not,
man.
Lane,
Get off the couch.
Lane, there's not any hope. We're done for.
Yeah, that's impressive. You must have some base conditioning that you're able to draw upon.
And I will say I train really hard nowadays. That's one of the first projects I did where there wasn't a lot of training. This is still me in my early mountain endurance athlete mindset of I'm still kind of figuring this whole thing out, right? Like I realize that I'm faster and stronger than your average runner, for example, but I didn't understand how to get to that next level of elitism is essentially, and training is absolutely the way to do it. Yeah. So for any endeavor that I'm doing nowadays, like even the marathon that I have in 2 days, I trained 10 weeks specifically for this marathon.
Yeah.
So I have my.
I feel better now.
Sure.
Knowing that, but I'm also incredibly impressed that you rolled off the couch with ankle problems and accomplished that. I really like a quote I saw attributed to you that says, "You said most limits aren't real, they're learned." I've been rereading some books, The Big Leap. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. And what to say when you talk to yourself about self-talk. And so I've been rereading some literature that sort of focuses on the messages we've had from the time we were young and how we incorporate that into our thought process, and we place these artificial limits on ourselves and think that we're not capable of doing things. So I really like your quote. Could you sort of talk about that a little bit? You feel like limits aren't real. How do you find your limits?
That's a great question. Growing up, I would have probably said that limits were real, and I was very limited of who I was as an individual in my younger years. And I think whenever I broke into getting into the Navy and trying to become a SEAL, that's where I really learned that I can do whatever I want in this life.
Yeah.
And it took some time for me to realize this after I quit Hell Week in BUD/S, which was one of the biggest takeaways from the Navy for me, was that I can literally go do whatever I want as long as I put my mind and my physical power towards it, or whatever it may be. And so I adopted that mindset, and I brought it with me to Colorado and started using that towards mountain endeavors, climbing mountains, breaking speed records, for example. And I realized that if you want it, you can will it.
Yeah.
So interesting.
I love that.
That realization came. So like, what was the thought process of quitting Hell Week? Was it just like, you know what, I can do anything I want, and this is not what I want? Is that kind of where your mind was at? Or was it like, this shit is hard, excuse my language, or was it like, this is
Enough
hard,
of this.
Yeah.
and it's definitely not for me, and I could do anything except this?
Sure.
Like, walk me through that.
And I think I could go back and do it if I wanted to. I just don't think I want to, and I don't think I wanted to. I think it was a false mask that I put in front of myself, trying to establish myself as a person, reinventing myself essentially, and then realizing that this was not who I really wanted to be.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to keep the hair.
Yeah, I had to cut my hair when I went. It was probably half the length, and I shaved it right off.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome.
It's just an interesting concept of like being in BUD/S, being in that program. And I mean, obviously we've all seen the documentaries or videos or movies, and it is hell on earth, and going, I could do anything. I'm out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't have that while I was there.
Right.
It came after the fact.
Okay.
Just being able to put myself in the position to go to BUD/S, for example, was one of the biggest pieces of transformation for my life. Prior to that, I had really been doing nothing in life. I had been running around with the wrong crowds, experimenting with the wrong things, and just not living a quote unquote good life and going down the right path. And so when I look back at this old me essentially and look at what I've, turned it into, BUD/S is honestly easy now that I think about it. I could go back and I think I could do BUD/S, but I don't want to.
Right.
So it's a mindset that I adopted after the fact. And I think when I was in BUD/S and going through that process, I was still trying to learn this, and I wasn't mentally wise enough at that age of 22 or 23 to understand this all.
And I think that's extremely healthy because like, I was 6 years in the Marine Corps Reserves, and my relationship with that is very, like most people don't even know I was in it because I never bring it up, because in my mind, I was never deployed, therefore was I ever really in?
Sure.
And to somebody that served 4 or 5 tours in a combat zone, that's probably an accurate mentality. But to somebody who never even thought about serving, like, so it's a relative scale of service or whatnot. So just having the thought to even try, relative to somebody who's never even gotten off the couch, is massive. So,
I completely agree with that.
yeah.
It's so great that you recognized during that process, unless you said it was afterwards, that maybe I can do this, but this isn't. I've set myself up to do this because somehow that allows me to redefine myself. But you recognize that wasn't the path, and at the same time, it empowered you afterwards. It changed your life. Was there some cathartic event leading up to that led you to go through that process?
To the Navy in general.
Yeah, you said that you weren't living the right life.
Right.
And so you must have had a moment where you went, I'm going to change who I am. I'm going to go do this thing.
I've had several of those moments leading up to that.
Right.
And it started probably in my high school years where I learned what, drugs and alcohol were, for example. And I really started to experiment. And I was an athlete. And so I had my senior year of football taken away from me for failing a drug test for smoking weed, for example.
Yeah.
And so I got to experience, loss and heartbreak from using and abusing certain substances.
Yeah.
Watched friends pass away. My best friend from high school, he passed away from an overdose several years later.
Yeah.
And my other best friend from high school was in and out of the prison systems. And so I was a part of this crowd doing things that aren't right.
Yeah.
And I grew up in a Christian household. My parents were as supportive as you could ever imagine. They came to all my sporting events. So like the structure that I had behind the scenes was what anybody would think is quite perfect, right? And for me, I was just like, I want to see what the other side of the coin's like. Yeah. And I sure did. I experienced all of it: death, overdose, loss, friends going in and out of the systems. And at one point, I found myself in the middle of an abuse cycle, and I had two different dreams who correlated between heaven and hell. I used a substance, and I went to sleep and was in heaven and like picturing my life with all the things I could have ever wanted and like living the absolute dream life. And so then I woke up, hit it again, went back to bed, and was living in hell. And it was the most terrifying experience of my life, hearing and feeling and smelling suffering and pain, where I woke up and I called my mom and I asked for help right then and there.
Wow.
And for the next year after that, I was in and out of rehab systems until I gained the ability to go play college football.
Wow.
I reached out to an old school who offered me a scholarship, an NAIA school, and they said that they would give it back to me like 3 years later. And so throughout my process at rehab, the rehab was ran by an ex-NFL football player, Isaiah Robertson.
Yeah.
So I got to learn and train with him and some of the guys that were close to him and really gain my skills back and my confidence to go back out to the field and play. And I went to school, broke my ankle a month into practice. There it goes, gone. And so I get, pushed back down to the cycle of, okay, now what am I going to do? How am I going to reinvent myself again? And so the Navy thing sparked at a party I was having at my grandparents' lake house one night. And this kid was talking, I don't even know the guy's name anymore. He was talking about going to the Navy and he mentioned Navy SEALs. And I was like, tell me more about that.
Yeah.
And literally right then when he told me the whole process, I called my dad the next day, and sure enough, one of his Young Life kids from the church ministry stuff that he did back in the day was a Navy SEAL, and he lived right down the street. So 2 days after that, I was talking to a former Navy SEAL, training with these guys, being mentored by, some of the highest warriors in the United States, and was on the path to reinventing myself again. So there's like this multitude of low points to these reinventions of.
That's an extraordinary story. Thank you for sharing that, and congratulations.
Thank you.
It sounds like you've reinvented your best version of yourself at this moment in time.
I can't complain too much.
Yeah.
Do you think doing the extreme sports is an attempt to run away from like possibly going back to like the poor decisions, or is it like when you're, and again, I'm not a psychologist. I don't do drugs, so I'm not familiar with that world at all. But it's like, who's the free climber?
Alex Honnold.
Yeah, like he does that stuff because he's extremely low dopamine. So I think that's what it is. Doing things to replace something else. So it's like, is it doing these extreme sports to replace the high of drugs, or do you think that's why it is, or just hey, I really like this thing?
It's probably correlated.
Or is it because you're really good at it?
I think it's a bit of both, right? Like I really love being in the mountains and being in nature and exploring and, seeing new things. And so there's definitely a high that comes with that, but it's a positive high compared to using drugs or alcohol to ruin your life, right? And so I think I found this true passion and I just honestly love doing it. And whether I was good or fast or strong at the sport or not, I would still be doing it because I simply love it and it's my passion. And so I think for me, maybe there's an addictive side to my personality that allows me to do these things at the levels that I do. but I channel all of my training and the things that I do into doing these projects and just really being immersed in beautiful locations and with people that I love.
So let's get into focus, because like if you're taking on one of these adventures, and you were talking about how it seemed completely different than like running a marathon because you have to take on these different inputs. Like, what kind of lens is it? I mean, how focused do you have to be? Is it like, I'm looking at this rock, I'm looking at this? Can you daydream? Like, where does your mind go when you're pursuing one of these ventures?
Sure. I think there's levels to it, right? So like some of the 14ers in the summer, literally I can toss in some headphones, listen to a podcast, run up and down and not think twice about anything I'm doing, because if I trip and fall, I'm not going to fall 1,000 feet to my death. I'm going to fall into some boulders. It's going to hurt. I'm going to get up and walk down the mountain. But for these high elevation extreme expeditions in the Himalayas, for example, it's pretty much laser focus, having to be very present in the moment and understanding that there is true consequence to my actions. Those are things that I think about prior to going onto the mountain. So, for example, running up Amna Blom, which is one of their most famous peaks in the Himalaya, it's a beautiful mountain. I'll have to show you a picture after this, or maybe I already have. But you're on knife edge ridges that are drop off 3,000 to 5,000 feet on either side for thousands of feet in this exposed zone I was in that zone for 3 to 4 hours, or most people are doing that for like 15 hours. But being ever so present to where you're hyper focused on where your hands are going with your carabiner on a certain rope, or where your hands being placed, or your ice axe is going into the ice or the rock, for example. It's true. I'm here right now. I'm not thinking about what my mom's doing back home or what my girlfriend's doing down at base camp or anything. It's literally just what is in front of me and how can I do this without dying.
I understand that you met your partner. She was running down a mountain and you were running up, or vice versa?
Something like that.
Something like that?
We met on the old school dating app, Instagram.
Okay. All right. And she shares your passion, and she supports your efforts. Are you guys true partners as teammates in these ventures?
We are. She's also a professional mountain athlete, an incredible woman, and does almost the same things that I do, and different to her own, liking and specifics. But we're traveling the world together. I'm about to meet her down in Ecuador just in a few days, and we do this a lot together. And so it's awesome having a partner who is right there in the same field and growing alongside me.
That's great. You would be an extraordinary mentor to young men, and there's a crisis in this country with young men who maybe have gone through some of the things that you were able to remove yourself from and to achieve what you've achieved. And I won't turn this into a podcast about all the things afflicting young men, but it's well documented that they're struggling with anxiety and depression, and they're medicating and they're not communicating effectively. And I would just see you as an extraordinary mentor with an extraordinary story to tell. Do you think about how you might be able to reach other people with your story?
Yeah, I think about that often, and I'm still brainstorming the ideas of how to implement my story into a wider spectrum, or even a smaller focus, whatever it may be. So I've done, a couple different public speaking events like the TED Talk and a couple mountaineering talks, but I would love to break into that field of sharing my story to impact others deeper on deeper levels, even outside of the mountains, obviously, because like you said, there is a crisis with young men in the entire world, but especially in the United States. And I think that there is a lot of room for mentors to step in and speak on these things.
I hope you find a path to that, because I think you can articulate a great story and provide a vision for others. So what is the life expectancy in terms of professionally of a professional mountain athlete?
Sure. That's a great question.
How old are you now?
I just turned 30.
You just turned 30. So are you an old man in the mountain athlete?
Actually, I think I'm really young still.
Okay.
Most 20-year-olds aren't doing the things that I'm doing.
Right.
I think most people kind of get into this world of big mountaineering in their 30s. I could be wrong. Everybody's different, right?
Yeah.
But the life expectancy is, when do I accidentally touch the wrong rock on a mountain, or how long can I keep
I should have
myself
phrased it differently. What is the career
Sure.
duration of a professional mountain athlete? So you've got some years left.
Yes.
Physically, you're not at a place where you are being diminished as a professional mountain athlete. What's next? You've done 400,000 vertical feet in a month, and you've done the 14ers. You're going to Everest, you said.
I've been on 2 expeditions to Everest to help a good friend. I am personally not climbing Everest in my near future, as for me, gaining that kind of funding is something I'm still working on bridging the gap between.
Yep.
Some of these projects that I have on my bookshelf are extremely expensive, and some of these sponsors that work in the outdoor industry, quite honestly, just don't have the funding to provide for some of these things.
So, but what does, just to derail that real quick, what does it take?
What does what take?
Just one of these expeditions. You say it does.
So Everest was 40, 45,
right?
right?
And I want you to hold on to, and I apologize for everything, but I think it's important to get into that.
No, absolutely. Like again, Everest, for example, you're talking about 40 to 45,000 baseline minimum to go climb Everest. And for me, that's not worth it to me. I think that $45,000 can be put into a different project. For example, I have a pretty big project that I've built up called the Andes 6000ers. There's 100 6,000 meter peaks in the Andes.
100?
100.
Okay.
And nobody's climbed the entire list. And so instead of taking 45K to go climb Everest, I would put that towards the Andes project that nobody has ever done or completed, and go try to, break ground in a place that hasn't been broken yet. So, for example, these projects can be anywhere from 40,000 to hundreds of thousands. Like Everest, for me, the only reason I'd want to go climb it is if I were to get the 14 peaks funded. So there's 14 8,000 meter peaks, like I mentioned earlier, and to climb all 14 of those within like a small time frame of 3 to 6 to 9 months, you're talking about close to $1 million. And there's been 2 people that have done it in 3 months and 6 months with oxygen, but the next step is to do it without oxygen. No one has really taken on that venture, and that's what excites me, things like that.
Why does it take $1 million?
It's just really expensive. And to break it down, the logistics for Everest, that's 40 grand right there for one expedition. And I need to do this 14 times plus helicopters between each and every base camp. And so you have to get your international flights, let's say $2,000 to get over there, right? And now to fly from Kathmandu into the Everest Valley and out, you're talking about another $1,000 to $2,000, depending on how fast you get in and out. And to do it in a speed record fashion for like the 14 peaks, you're literally, basing this off of weather windows. So you'll go in, you'll be acclimated, you'll climb one peak, and you'll take a helicopter from this base camp to the next one over. That'll cost you $5 grand right there. And you're talking about doing that 14 plus times on top of the logistic value of, 40 to 60,000 for just a single mountain to go climb it. So there's a lot of different aspects that come into being able to, pursue a high value record like that. And people want their money.
So it's basically 50 to 100 grand per mountain times 14.
Essentially, right. And things go wrong. So like if you're on a mountain and the weather shuts down for that mountain, but there's another one that's open, you have to have the funds to spend 5 or 10 grand to heli from here around the corner to the other one, right? And it's not cheap. It's really expensive. So these
I like the Andes project.
The Andes one is it's a unique one. It can be done for a lot cheaper, but it's way more remote. So they're spread out all along South America, from the high Atacama Desert to, the Peruvian Cordillera Blanca ranges. And there's anything from climbing 6,000 meter hills of sand to some of the hardest mountaineering in the world in Peru. Harder than peaks in the Himalayas, for example. Peaks that have only been climbed once in the past 30 years. And so there's a whole different aspect of logistics. And it's not as well developed like Nepal and Himalayan climbing. So the logistics and the infrastructure is a lot smaller. So you're really relying on yourself and who you can bring in as a team. Yeah. So it's cheaper.
And Lane, do you remember your question? Because I hijacked it. in the middle of your. He was answering it, and I hijacked it.
No, but that's okay.
apologize.
Oh, yeah, I think he had actually answered it.
Okay.
I think it was a career span or something like that.
Yeah, I was trying to kill you off, which wasn't wasn't intentional. You know, I said lifespan as opposed to career duration. I'm just thinking about athletes in other professions, right? I mean,
Sure.
LeBron James is what, almost 40,
I think he's like 75.
Yeah.
75 years old now, and so there is a, you know, there is a career span where at some point your ability to do that. I did see where there's an NFL quarterback that had been retired.
Rivers.
Yeah, Philip Rivers,
that.
that's come back to
The
the
practice squad.
and he's in his 40s.
44.
44.
Wow.
Yeah, so you know.
I mean, I would hope to be doing what I'm doing at 44. I think at a minimum, I have another 10 really good years ahead of me.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm in my prime yet. So at least 10 years. But we have a guy that, his name is Ludo something, and he's a 52-year-old dude who's winning some of the hardest, most famous mountain running races in the world right now.
Wow.
52, beating 30-year-olds.
So I'd like to get into the obvious. It's like climbing a mountain, like is the analogy of life or business or whatever, because like, to start a business, it's incredibly hard. To run a business, it's incredibly hard. To exit a business, it's incredibly hard. But climbing a mountain is probably, I say probably because I've never done it, incredibly hard. But at any given time, you can just stop and turn around. And same thing with business. So like, there's got to be some similarities or lessons the business can learn from climbing a mountain, or climbing mountain lessons from running a business. I'd like to open up the dialogue there to see if there's any there.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah, well, I would certainly see it as planning is a big component of this. So most successful businesses start with a plan. You've talked about funding, so you have to have a sense of reality about what capital does it take to do this, and you got to have a goal in mind. But I'm sort of intrigued with his making a living doing this, right? And I'm thinking about if I were him and I'm 30 and I'm doing these things, I'd want more sponsors, and I'd want to write a book, and I'd want somebody filming me. And so how would I, but I'd also be turning this into something that you might not enjoy. But that's the way my brain's kind of wired.
That's exactly the way I think about the future and the expectancy of my career as an actual athlete.
Yeah.
Writing the book, speaking about these things, and turning them into experiences that others can have as well.
Yeah.
Part of the things that I'm getting forward into in 2026 is starting to guide more and bring people on experiences like going to Everest Base Camp, like Roger mentioned, and bringing friends on experiences and opening a business around that, for example. I think there's a lot of experiences that I can provide that people aren't providing yet, and I think they're important. And to be able to go out and experience the human experience in a new place, in a very special place, it's really priceless, in my opinion.
Yeah.
One of the things that, because we were at dinner maybe a month or so ago, and Erin, his partner, one of the things that she does on social media, and I think she should lean in so hard on this, to the point where, Chris, I think you should just grab the camera and that's the only job you should ever do. She'll do the same thing he's doing, but in high heels.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And you should think about, if you want to go viral on TikTok, because Erin's gorgeous, but gorgeous in if she maybe she's like in a cocktail dress in high heels running up a mountain. Like, that's insane.
Well, I understand why you were attracted to her on the mountain then.
Right.
Well, I don't know.
That makes sense.
Was she in a cocktail dress when you met her?
She was not.
Okay.
She was not.
But it's just it's so absurd, that whole concept. It has to go viral.
100% agree.
Well, there are a lot of people,
Yeah.
99.999% of the people aren't going to get off their couch with a hurt ankle and go do what you do, but a lot of people would like to live vicariously through what you do. So being able to share those experiences in a way that catches their attention. is really powerful. You also have an incredible backstory of overcoming adversity to basically reinvent yourself, which I think is powerful. And now you've got a great-looking gal in high heels, by your side. So it sounds like you're set up for well, how did you say, 10, 14 years, 15 years?
Something like that.
Something like that.
That would be, ideal. And with those 10 or 14 years or whatever it is, building stepping stones to create value outside of the mountains themselves.
Yeah.
With photography and showing people these things, storytelling, YouTube, high heel videoing, mentoring to young people. I think there's a lot of opportunity in these places as an athlete. And like you mentioned, someone who has overcome adversity to reinvent myself, to make these things reality. And those are avenues of life that I do value and am consistently working on building.
Great story.
But don't you have something with Netflix coming up?
Correct. So that's another one of the gigs that I've been presented with. My ability to climb fast and, supply myself in extreme environments. I've been able to follow my friend Tyler around on Everest, and Netflix has bought a production for him and another guy named Carla racing up Everest, essentially. And I've been able to work as a videographer for them with this project. That comes out in August of 26, I believe.
So when you're a videographer on a project like that, does that mean you're filming like at base camp, or are you on the mountain with them?
Yeah.
And they're getting the credit, but you're filming it, but getting to do it on the side.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. So I've been able to document him on our previous expeditions before Netflix was ever involved. So I have a lot of backlog footage that I'm selling as well, but also joining him on these expeditions and filming while we're on the mountain. And they, like a Netflix production company who's building a big film like this, they're putting in a lot of money. And so they have however many other filmers on the mountain, but they're not walking or running up and down the mountain with them. They're staged in a location where he comes through Camp 2 and here he is putting his boots on and eating something, and up there he goes, compared to like I can walk or climb with him and show people in real time what is going on the mountain.
Have you thought about, the effect of like how AI comes in and how now green screen and all these different things? Like, do you think there's still going to be a desire to see actual humans doing these feats of endurance and strength and whatever, when it's like, hey, it'd be a lot easier if we just AI videoed Lane climbing up Everest versus having Lane on Everest?
I don't think AI is going to be able to touch this scene. I think people really do enjoy true storytelling and extreme things, or not even extreme, but they like human stories. And AI just can't replicate a real human story. I mean, can you build a robot who can kind of do the same thing, run up a mountain really fast? Sure, but it's still not a human. So I think there's a lot of value in humans doing extraordinary things and breaking limits that humans have. It's one thing to build a super robot that can go climb Everest really fast, but for a real living person to go and do it and to document their story doing it, it's extraordinary. And I don't think you can tap into faking that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm judging you for your AI question.
It's a valid question.
I mean, they'll probably make some really cool AI movies of, AI doing things in the mountains, but it's still not real.
Well, I agree with you, because like obviously owning a video production company, I get hit with questions all the time of, are you scared of AI taking your company? And it's like, well, AI is, all it does is just compile what's already there.
Yeah.
It doesn't create anything new. And so much of storytelling is that creative aspect of creating something new. So if AI is just doing what's already there, you're not going to get any cool new stuff.
Sure.
Basically, humans are, there is no spoon. AI is a spoon.
Yeah.
Going back to the Matrix.
And now can AI take all that stuff and make something really cool out of it and maybe edit it all for you? Sure, probably.
Yeah.
That's definitely probably a possibility. Like you said, they're not going to be like, okay, where's the spoon?
Right.
Here it is.
Exactly. So like, I think this is fascinating. Like, the business aspect of it, the lessons, the mentality, because one of the things, I don't know if I've said on the podcast before, but like as an entrepreneur, one of my biggest pet peeves or just things that annoys me the most is you go to these conferences and mindset. Everybody talks about mindset and I'm like, shut up, just tell me how to do the thing. And then as I've owned a business now for 5.5 years, I understand how important the mindset is just because it is so easy to quit. It is so easy to be like, self-doubt. It is so easy to spiral. And in just having the consistency of just like, waking up, taking the punch and figuring it out. And to me, there's so many, I don't know if synergies are the right word, but like similarities maybe between like climbing a mountain and building business. That analogy is so, the mindset has to be so similar.
Sure.
Yeah,
I think you're right. And like for building a business and climbing a mountain, there's a lot of steps in order to be able to do both of them. And so to be able to sit down and really, for one, be self-aware of who you are, what your capabilities are, and building out the project and the steps to get to where you want to be, or to buy the business or build a business or to climb the mountain, I think you have to have a certain mindset, right? And that for me is the mindset of being willing to push past uncomfortability.
So, but to keep on with that analogy, in business, if I get to the top of the mountain may be an exit.
Sure.
Maybe I get acquired. Maybe I'm set for life. What's the top of the mountain for you? Is it just, hey, I summited, now I just go back down and find another mountain? Like what is the end result? Like what is the win?
Yeah, for me, the win is being able to share these experiences with others, allow people around me in my close-knit communities to, live vicariously through me, and or to motivate them to go and chase their own mountains, whether it's real mountains or building a business, for example. I think if my story can help impact others to want to get off the couch and go do something extraordinary in their own right, no matter what the field is, I think that's a win. And if someone, I get messages all the time of people that are inspired by my story and they have now done X, Y, and Z because of listening to my story. And I think that is the most meaningful part for me, is when I can, see somebody come to me and be like, hey man, because of what you said or did, I've been able to do this, this, and this. I think that is the ultimate win, is being able to give back to others and help others get to where they want to be.
Yeah, I think that's one of the coolest things about even this little podcast, which is when you get feedback that, hey man, I really like that thing, or hey, I like that story that Chris gave because it had an impact on that. And that's one of the things that I enjoy is even though I may not be giving the stories, our guests are giving stories, and those stories impact other people. And I get a lot of pleasure of just being that conduit of that. I don't know if you've experienced that yet.
Yeah, we all want to be relevant. We all want to offer something of value to others, and I think we all seek ways to do that. And I think it's great what you're doing. I hope that you continue to explore ways to be that mentor, that guide, that person that inspires other people. It's just a great story.
I appreciate that.
And
hopefully you're not on Lane's timeline of like, hey, when are you gonna die?
Right.
I knew that was coming.
What do you got left in the tank here?
Yeah.
No.
There's a lot that I want to do.
Yeah.
A lot of places I want to see. There's just too much to do.
Well, I look forward to seeing all those stories, following you on Instagram, seeing the Netflix, seeing all the new deals coming out.
Yeah, where do people
appreciate it.
find you on Instagram?
Chris J. Fish.
Chris J. Fish. Okay. If I were on Instagram, I would go look at Chris J. Fish. I'll have to depend on
You don't even know what Instagram is.
I'm aware of what it is, but I depend upon my wife and 2 daughters to tell me what's happening in the world
That's fair.
of social media.
There's so many. You know what? That's probably for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I decided that there were people I really thought I liked, and then when I read their stories on Instagram and Facebook, I decided I wouldn't like them if I continued to read what they had to say, and I really valued keeping relationships.
One of the things that's, and this is way off topic, but like, if you follow someone like Chris, you're like, you see the beautiful mountains, you see the feats that he's doing, but then sometimes you just get randomness on your phone of like TikTok, and you see these things called streamers.
Yeah.
And it's just like these the worst humans on the planet documenting their lives, and you're like, are people really this self-absorbed?
Yes.
Who watches this, Chris?
Yes, they are.
They make so much money doing it.
It is just disgusting.
It's crazy.
And it's just like, it's like reality TV to the point of like I'm losing brain cells talking about this.
Yeah.
And it's just like the fact that you don't even know what that is. I'm like, I wish I could go back to that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never been on TikTok.
Keep it that way.
You know, but I am on LinkedIn. So I have one channel, and I block political content. So I'm just in my little bubble.
Hey,
The sun is shining, everybody's happy.
That's a good bubble to be in.
Yeah, it's not a bad bubble,
Yeah.
actually, particularly in today's sort of polarized environment, right?
Yeah,
It's
that's a
just kind
great
of
bubble.
block out the noise and, focus on the positives.
as we wrap, that is interesting because like when you're doing something like the extreme mountaineering, what do you call it? Extreme mountaineering?
You can call it that.
Okay. Well, I don't want to be offensive.
No, yeah. I just call myself a mountain athlete, really.
Mountain athlete. Okay. So being a mountain athlete, you have your small community. I'm sure there's, how many mountain athletes are there in the world at any given time?
Good question. Several thousands.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
But
it's not as small as you would think. It's still small.
But not millions.
There's probably millions of people hiking, hiking trails, climbing mountains.
Professionally.
Professionally, yeah, not a lot. There's probably a couple thousand.
Right.
Maybe.
But the point I was getting at though is like so few people that are doing this, like there's probably a strong community aspect of it. And you probably are in your own little bubble where you don't know what's going on in the world. You're not really following politics. You're not following, who's the biggest scandal or whatever. And that's gotta be, enlightening as well.
Yeah. when Aaron and I are out in the mountains, or any of us with our friends, it's the mountains. There's obviously things going on in the world, and I stay a little bit up to date, but I try to block out the noise like you mentioned and, enjoy what's around me and see the positive in everything.
Yeah, because you're probably not like 1, 2, 3 step, check my phone. 1, 2,
Right.
3 step, check my phone.
Yeah.
You probably don't even realize you have your phone on you until you get back to the car or something.
I do pull out, take pictures if I don't have my camera on me, but that's about it.
Right.
Yeah.
But you probably out a signal where you can't upload it.
You'd be surprised on any of the 14ers. You can pretty much in Colorado. You can pretty much get a signal. You can make a phone call home. I called my mom from the 8th highest mountain in the world. Although it was through a radio from the radio's Starlink back home.
Okay.
But I talked to my parents on the top of the mountain, the 8th highest in the world. It's pretty cool.
It's amazing.
In the Krakauer book, he chronicles that there was a guy that died on Everest, and he knew he was dying.
You and death.
He was trapped on the mountain, and he was out of oxygen, and a guy had a satellite phone, and he got to talk to his wife while he was on Everest, knowing that his demise was at hand.
I think
I do.
selfish.
I have taken a morbid turn on this show. I don't know why.
It's a reality. It happens a lot.
Yeah, that'd be a tough call to make.
Well, Chris, thanks for being on.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you maybe take another turn towards a better direction, right?
Yeah. Well, I wish you many more summits. I look forward to seeing your future.
Thank you.
I look forward to dinner.
Yeah. And I will say, I do not plan on dying in the mountains.
No, please
There's a
don't.
lot of people that are like, well, at least he died doing what he loved. And it's like,
No.
no, how about not?
Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that.
I
Stay
like what I
alive.
love a lot more
Yeah.
and show people and give people those experiences as well.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks
thank you.
again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation.